So exciting to see all you here on this very, very special day. Some of you may not have celebrated Naw Rouz with the Baha'is before. Some of you may not even know what the Baha'i Faith is about. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what this night means to us here tonight, Naw Rouz. The word Naw Rouz in Persian means new day. Naw means new and Rouz is day. And it is the Baha'i New Year. And this New Year was first came into our faith through the Bab. And the Bab named this day, he called it the first day of the first month, the day of Baha and the month of Baha. So he called it Baha of Baha, which is the glory of glories. And then he named the day Yawm Olah. Yawm Olah, it means the day of God. That's what this is to Baha'is. It's the day of God. And Shoghi Effendi, he said that Naw Rouz is, quote, a feast of hospitality and rejoicing. A feast of hospitality and rejoicing. So if you do anything tonight, just make sure that you're hospitable and you rejoice. That's really what you got to do tonight. Let's all be hospitable and let's rejoice, because that's what this is tonight. Now, it's a very special holy day even for Baha'is, because, you know, all of our other holy days, they commemorate a particular event in history, either the birth or the passing or the declaration of the Bab, Baha'u'llah, Abdul Baha. But this holy day, and this holy day alone, does not commemorate a specific historical event. Rather, it marks the vernal equinox. It marks the time in which the sun is equally casting its light on both the northern and southern hemisphere. As you know, Naw Rouz, or this day that marks the vernal equinox, is the most celebrated day in the history of mankind. If you talk to anthropologists or historians or archaeologists, they are quick to point out that this day, the vernal equinox, the time in which the sun is equally shedding its light on the earth, has been celebrated and practiced by almost all ancient cultures. If you look in every continent of the globe, you will find ancient monuments that all mark this day, like Stonehenge and so on. And this is because the ancients were very well aware of the power of the sun. And all you have to think about is this: the earth is like this, it's a big round ball, and see the equator going around that. And the sun is going like this. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's there, and it moves. But at a certain time of year, only twice a year, it's exactly here, so that when you look west or east, when you look east, where is east? Who knows where east is? Okay, if you look east exactly at sunrise, the sun is perfectly east. It's not over there or over there. And if you look at sunset, it's right there. And so they call this the equinox. Equinox comes from the Latin, which means equal night. It means that the nighttime is exactly the same length as the day. So when you go to sleep tonight and it's dark, it will be exactly the same time as it was day. And so this particular date, Naw Rouz, is very, very special, and we call it the Day of God. I kind of like to think that sometimes we celebrate the birthday of Baha'u'llah or the birthday of Abdul Baha or of the Bab, but Naw Rouz is God's birthday, because actually that's exactly what it says in the Akdas. It says it's the Day of God. And the interesting thing is that some of you, Naw Rouz is also the ancient Persian holy day. And I think is there anyone here tonight that's of Persian background? Anyone here? 1, 2, 3. Okay, good. So you all know that you celebrated Naw Rouz last night at, was it 10:14 p.m.? Isn't that right? 10:14 p.m. And so this is very interesting, because I want to read to you what Baha'u'llah said about Naw Rouz, because when is Naw Rouz? And when is Naw Rouz this year? And it's very interesting this year. I'm going to read you from Baha'u'llah's most holy book, the Kitab-i Akdas. He said, "The festival of Naw Rouz falleth on the day that the sun entereth the sign of Aries." Now, just so you understand, when the sun is moving, there's 12 constellations, and the sign of Aries is where the sun is exactly in the spot. So he says, "The festival of Naw Rouz falleth on the day that the sun entereth the sign of Aries. Even should this occur no more than 1 minute before sunset." And when I read this in the Akdas, Baha'u'llah was really particular. Are you really sure, Baha'u'llah, it has to be exactly to the minute? You know, it has to be to the minute. If the sun, if the sun hits that spot at a different time, then Naw Rouz falls on a different day. And lo and behold, that is the case. Naw Rouz can actually be on the 20th, or the 21st, or the 22nd, because Baha'u'llah was particularly concerned that Naw Rouz is completely aligned with the sun. Because Naw Rouz is a symbol for us aligning ourselves with God. It's a symbol. It has deep spiritual significance. And we find in the book Priceless Pearl, where Shoghi Effendi was looking at this teaching, and Rehekanum says this about Shoghi Effendi and the date of Naw Rouz. She writes, "In everything he did, the guardian was painstakingly exact, leaving nothing to chance and very little to judgment of his co-workers. One of the innumerable examples of this is his thoroughness with which he always ascertained the exact day a Baha'i commemoration would occur. Shoghi Effendi was very careful to ascertain the exact time, the spring equinox, which, if it occurs before a certain hour, means that the Baha'i New Year falls on 20 March instead of 21 March. We find telegrams such as these, sent in 1923 to his cousin in Beirut. Quote, ascertain and wire exact time, vernal equinox, unquote. He no doubt considered more scientific information would be forthcoming from the American University in Beirut than locally in Haifa. So you see, Shoghi Effendi, he picked this up from Baha'u'llah, that Naw Rouz must be perfectly aligned with the sun because we must be perfectly aligned with God. And so I'm going to read you a quotation from Shoghi Effendi, which he talks about this, because it relates to tonight. They say, regarding Naw Rouz, if the vernal equinox falls on the 21st of March before sunset, it is celebrated on that day. If at any time after sunset, Naw Rouz will then, as stated by Baha'u'llah, fall on the 22nd. As to the spot, which should be regarded as a standard, this is a matter which the Universal House of Justice will have to decide. So when I read that, I realized, so this is interesting, that Baha'u'llah said Naw Rouz can be either yesterday or today or tomorrow. It just really depends, but we don't normally know this because the House of Justice has to pick which spot it's sunset. Is it sunset in Haifa? Is it sunset in London? Is it sunset in Los Angeles? Is it sunset at my house? I don't really know where it's supposed to be. So we don't know yet, but we do know this year. The reason we know this year is it so happens that Naw Rouz this year, 2012, is the earliest Naw Rouz in over 100 years. In fact, not since, 1896, 116 years ago. Not for 116 years has Naw Rouz been earlier than it was this year. So this is Naw Rouz is a very special day, and this is a very special Naw Rouz. And it's all about alignment with God. Each year, we mark our calendar by being in perfect alignment with the sun, the day in which the sun completely sheds its radiance on the entire earth. And so I want to leave you with this quotation of Abdu'l-Baha about Naw Rouz. He says, this sacred day, when the sun illumines equally the whole earth, is called the equinox. And the equinox is the symbol of the manifestation of God. The sun of truth rises on the horizon of divine mercy and sends forth its rays. This day is consecrated to commemorate it. It is the beginning of spring. When the sun appears at the equinox, it causes a movement in all living things. The mineral world is set in motion. Plants begin to shoot. The desert is changed into a prairie. Trees bud and every living thing responds, including the bodies of animals and men. The rising of the sun at the equinox is the symbol of life. And likewise, it is the symbol of the divine manifestations of God. For the rising of the sun of truth in the heaven of divine bounty established the signal of life for the world. The human reality begins to live. Our thoughts are transformed and our intelligence is quickened. The Sun of Truth bestows eternal life just as the solar sun is the cause of terrestrial life. And so you can see Naw Rouz is deeply spiritually significant because it is a symbol of us aligning ourselves with God and receiving his life-giving forces. So I can think of nothing better than for all of us to be gathering here tonight and celebrating the Day of God. I want to talk about a few great Naw Rouzes in Baha'i history. You know, we've had some really great hits when it comes to Naw Rouz. There's been some really good Naw Rouzes. And so I want to talk about that. You know that probably the most famous Naw Rouz is 1909. Naw Rouz of 1909. As probably many of you know, Abdu'l-Baha took the remains of the Bab, which had been not at rest for 60 years, and he laid them in the ground exactly on Naw Rouz of 1909. So this is probably the first great Naw Rouz. And I thought for a while, why did Abdu'l-Baha wait? 60 years, why did he wait? And he put the Bab's remains on Mount Carmel in the very spot where Baha'u'llah told him to put them, on Naw Rouz of 1909. So that really was a great Naw Rouz. But then I was reading messages of Shoghi Effendi. And this is really interesting because Shoghi Effendi did a very interesting thing. You know that it took Shoghi Effendi until 1953, from 1909 to 1953, to complete the Shrine of the Bab. That beautiful building, you know, with the gold leaf dome that we see when we go on pilgrimage or you see in pictures and slides. And Shoghi Effendi, he wrote in 1953, he said he recalls feelings of humble thankfulness and intense joy at the series of historic landmarks in the progress of that building. And then he said all the landmarks were at Naw Rouz. They were at various Naw Rouzes, and then he described them in great detail. He said that the Bab's remains were laid by Abdu'l-Baha at Naw Rouz in 1909. And then he says in 1949, he laid all the stones in the groundwork, and he did it exactly on Naw Rouz of 1949. He said Naw Rouz 1940 coincided with the laying of the first threshold of stones on the whole arcade of the Shrine of the Bab. Then he said later in Naw Rouz of 1951, that synchronized with the excavation within the shrine of the foundation of the 8 pillars. You know, the 8 pillars that support the dome? They were actually excavated right on Naw Rouz. Shoghi Effendi waited until Naw Rouz and did it. Then in 1952, he completed the octagon, which had the whole crown of the shrine. And he did that exactly on Naw Rouz of 1952. And he said this was a succession of glorious Naw Rouzes. So now, every time I look at the Shrine of the Bab, I look at the grounds and the rocks, I look at the walls and I look at the pillars, I look at the dome, even the very sepulchre where the Bab is laid. And it was all synchronized with the sun. So you can see Baha'u'llah wanted Naw Rouz to be exactly not a minute before or later. Abdu'l-Baha wanted to bury the Bab at that time. And Shoghi Effendi, as he built the Shrine of the Bab, it's an expression of the synchronization to God's will, the synchronization to God. And then when Shoghi Effendi finally completed the Shrine of the Bab, he wrote to the Baha'is, and he just blew our minds. Because he said, this Shrine of the Bab has now been finished, and it is the center of 9 circles, he said. I couldn't believe this when I first read it. He said that the Shrine of the Bab is the center of 9 concentric circles. The Bab is the center, and around it is his sepulcher, and then his shrine, and then the gardens, and then the Holy Land. Finally, the world. And Shoghi Effendi said, these 9 circles, like a bullseye that focuses in on the Bab, are 9 circles because they represent in the spiritual realm the fact that all of the manifestations of God circle round in adoration the Bab himself. It's like an emanation or a flow, just like a circle. And so then when I thought about that, I said, oh my gosh, the Shrine of the Bab is a symbol of God on earth, and it's a symbol of us aligning ourselves with God, and it was completely constructed around Naw Rouz. So I thought, we have to sing a song tonight about the Shrine of the Bab. I figured after I read that. So I'm going to ask Emily and Red if you can come forward, because Baha'u'llah wrote a tablet about the building of Mount Carmel, in which he talked about Mount Carmel. He said, God will sail his ark upon thee, And then he said, circle round in adoration, circle round your Lord. And this is called the Queen of Carmel. So I'm going to ask Emily and Red, in honor of Naw Rouz, as we think of that building and how it itself was constructed in synchronization with Naw Rouz, to sing this beautiful song, the Queen of Carmel.
Standing on a mountain, looking across the bay, the Queen of Carmel reigns. She reigns majestically. Cry out, O Zion, cry out to your Lord. Cry out, O Zion, circle round in adoration, circle round your Lord. Unto God, the Lord of lords, belong kingdoms of earth and heaven. Land and sea, rejoice this day, the day of revelation. Cry out, O Zion, cry out to your Lord. Cry out, O Zion, circle round in adoration, circle round your
Robed in white and crowned in gold, she stands for unity. God will sail his ark from deep, as mentioned in the book of names. Cry out, O Zion, cry out to your Lord. Cry out, O Zion. adoration.
Circle round your Lord.
Circle round in adoration.